I'm Amanda Leitner, and welcome to Rochester Rising, where we amplify the stories of Rochester entrepreneurs. Welcome to episode 209 of the podcast today. Welcome to today's show, whether you're joining us for the first time or if you're a frequent listener of the Rochester Rising podcast. I'm very grateful that you are spending some of your very valuable time with us today. So on the Rochester Rising podcast, we chat with a range of entrepreneurs, from brand new first-time entrepreneurs to serial entrepreneurs to long-established business owners, showcasing the culture of entrepreneurship taking place here in Rochester, Minnesota. And we really want to understand how and why people are building their businesses here and choosing to stay in the community. So we hope you enjoy this conversation today and take away something that you learned about what's going on in the business scene here in Rochester, or lessons learned that you can apply to your business. Today on the podcast, I had the great opportunity to chat virtually with Eve Meyer and Levi Sauerbrei of Diversity Crew. Diversity Crew is a for-profit business that started this July. It's a consortium of partners focusing on diversity and inclusion. Diversity Crew works alongside businesses, both large and small businesses, to understand their current diversity and inclusion efforts and to develop ways to improve or move these efforts forward. While Diversity Crew is a Dallas-based initiative, the team and the business is really remote, and Levi and Eve have very strong ties to the Rochester area, and you'll hear them talk about their summer home at Silver Lake, where they were talking to me from. And they really hope to get more involved in the entrepreneurial and business community and meet a lot more folks once the pandemic lessens in the community and across the U.S. So a little bit of background on Levi and Eve before we jump into the podcast today. Levi is an IT specialist and data administrator. He's probably best known as the Nerd Butler, primarily on Twitter, where you can find him. And he's really spent his career simplifying and explaining technology. Eve is a native of Southern Louisiana. She started her career on radio when she was 15, but she says she's always been building a company on the side, and she says these companies have usually ended up failing. When she was 32, she started the Dallas-based social media company, Social Media Delivered. She grew this business for 10 years and then sold it about 3.5 years ago, which she considers to be her first big success. So we had a really great conversation on the podcast today. I encourage you all to tune in. This is a wonderful conversation about equity, diversity, and inclusion, and different pathways to entrepreneurship. So on the podcast today, we talk a lot about Diversity Crew, how it was started, who the business works with, and how you should be thinking about diversity and inclusion efforts within your own company. Diversity Crew is holding a completely free program this Thursday on January 21st called the ROI of DEI. It's completely free. It'll be held from 9 to 3 p.m., but you can stay for the whole day or you can jump in and out of sessions as your time permits. But this program will help to provide insights you can implement immediately to see real improvements in equity, especially around the areas of racial, ethnicity, gender, LGBTQ+, religion, age, disability, and accessibility equity for your business. So check it out. Again, it's called the ROI of DEI, and you can find that just by a simple Google search, or we will have the link to that registration in our show notes, so you can check it out there. So the Rochester Rising podcast is a weekly podcast that comes out every Wednesday to showcase stories of Rochester-based entrepreneurship. This podcast comes out every week. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, really wherever you listen in to podcasts. We also have a lot more content about entrepreneurship and stories of business owners in Rochester on our website at rochesterrising.org. So I encourage you all to check it out there. Rochester Rising is part of the nonprofit Collider, which is a Rochester-based 501c3 organization that supports early-stage Rochester entrepreneurs through events, education, space, and storytelling. You can find out more about Collider and how it can help your business at collider.mn. All right, so now on to the podcast today with Eve and Levi of Diversity Crew. Thanks for doing this today in between the holidays. It's sometimes what are busy and sometimes really boring times of the year, depending on your perspective.
Yeah, we're ready to get back to work today, so this is great.
But yeah, I just wanted to start out by asking you both to share a little bit about yourselves. You know, what's your personal interests? What are some of your experiences that kind of make you both who you are?
You go first.
Wow. All right. No pressure. So I've been a nerd my whole life. I got my first computer when I was 12, and my dad basically told me, if I have any questions about this thing, I'm going to ask you. So I jumped right in and started learning right away. I was 4 years in the Air Force as an electronics technician, a radio technician. Got out with a family and studied electrical engineering for a while, studied computer science for a while, had to get a job because the kids needed to eat. And so finished school in the evening with a degree in information systems. And since that time, I've been primarily a database administrator, but I've had every role from IT director to help desk support tech in sort of the IT space. I was not really an entrepreneur until I met Eve about 6 years ago. I'd always thought about it and wanted to give it a shot. I'm certainly not risk averse. I just didn't know which hoops to jump through to get that ball started. So I've spent most of my career trying to simplify and explain technology to business users, business owners, and individuals because we live in an era where the tools are accessible and affordable in the grand scheme of things, but so many people view them as too complicated or inaccessible, or they're going to be too expensive, or they have the tools already and they're not making proper use of them. So I spend a lot of my time and energy trying to help people understand what they can do with the technology they already have and what the best way to spend those resources, whether it's their own time to learn something or hiring out an expert for a particular task. But that's what I spend almost all my time doing now. I just mostly do it for Eve.
There's a lot. So I grew up in South Louisiana, and I had very young parents. I was an only child, which led to the belief that I was the center of the universe. And I haven't left that belief yet, so that's good. I started out in radio when I was 15 years old, and I really loved it. I ended up in the music business for years and always had a company on the side, but didn't have a lot of money growing up. And my parents would always start a company on the side and in the midst of putting each other through school and having full-time jobs, the companies would usually fail because we didn't have enough money. But our time together, our family time together was always starting up a company. So I really loved it. It meant love to me and entertainment. So I went through the music industry and then always had a company on the side and usually failed. I did everything. I had a cupcake company when cupcakes were hot. Gained 30 pounds. That was a terrible idea. I hated baking and they were really delicious. Went through 6 or 7 companies, real estate, different stuff, and just always did it on the side and learned a lot about becoming an entrepreneur, learned a lot about failing, learned a lot about being broke. And all these things that I think sometimes you hear, you must have a business plan. Somebody's definitely going to give you a loan. A lot of those things to me, I found to not be true. And so during that, I worked in corporate America and I got fired a lot because I was really bad at listening to people and wanted to do things in a different way. So I was always meant to be an entrepreneur, but it took me until I was about 32, I think in 2008, to be in the position that I had to be an entrepreneur because I got laid off for whatever time. The economy was terrible and I was desperate. I had a small child. I needed to find a way to make money. And so I think this was maybe my 6th company I started. And I did it by going onto Craigslist and telling people, hey, I'm on unemployment. I don't know what I'm doing, but I think there's something to this social media thing. And I'm going to start a social media company. And if you're on unemployment and broke and bored right now too, come over to my house. We'll work on this together. And if it works, I'll share the money with you. So strangely, that worked. And about 10 to 20 people showed up at my house with a 2-year-old often running naked around the house. It's kind of like the Facebook movie, but like just not as cool with no pool. And so we started a really cool company called Social Media Delivered, which I had for 10 years in Dallas, that grew to serve organizations like Chili's and StubHub and Insperity, and grew to several countries and grew to 30 employees. And we had a great run, and I learned so much, and I sold that company about 3.5 years ago. But that was my first real, longevity of success and real money making in being an entrepreneur. So my focus was definitely in sales and in marketing for a long time. But during the time in that company, what I learned was, what I was really passionate about was building culture, building a diverse culture, building an inclusive culture, breaking down stereotypes about people and leveraging their talents. And over time, I became known as a writer and a speaker about marketing, and then made that shift into those topics. And so that's a little bit about me.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I think growing up, the mindset I always heard was that, you get a 9-to-5 job, you work there for 50 years, and then you retire and you just, follow what the boss says. And I think it took me to about the same time when I was 32 to be like, realizing that my thoughts of, being your own boss or piloting your own direction weren't wrong. You didn't have to fit into this mold. And like a lot of people actually don't fit into that mold. So that was about the same time I had that realization as well. And it's definitely like, it sounds simple, but it's like eye-opening to be like, this doesn't have to be this way that, society's telling you have to live your life.
Yeah. And I think so many people deal with imposter syndrome when it comes to being an entrepreneur or starting their first business. And a lot of times desperation, times like we're in right now with the pandemic, really are the catalyst for you just taking that leap because you have to. A lot of people would tell me, gosh, Eve, you're so brilliant. You're so ahead of the game. I wasn't brilliant. I was broke. I was desperate. And sometimes that's the only thing that puts you in the position to take that leap and believe in yourself enough to do it. I'm also an author, and so many people will ask me, like, what did you know that let you become an author? How were you able to write a book? I don't know. Everybody starts out writing a book knowing nothing special. They have something to say. And they keep going after it, and they have a message they want to get across, something they want to help people with. There's no secret sauce to being an author or writing a book. And there's no secret sauce to starting a company. I have failed in every way at every kind of company and everything in life. And then sometimes I've succeeded. And I think that's why Levi and I have been really passionate about wanting to help people who are entrepreneurs, particularly people who don't start with a bunch of money or any money, or, it's something, at least for me, I grew up with the experience of my parents loving work, but they didn't have money to start companies with. They hadn't come from money and understandings of equity and, things that we had to learn about. So we really love helping people figure those things out in simple ways.
I think it's interesting too. A lot of the times you hear in like popular culture or whatever that entrepreneurship develops out of seeing a need and filling it. And that's absolutely the case, but it also comes out of like necessity. Like there's no other path for you but to do this, whether like you can't find a job that you like, or just creating a better path for yourself and your family. And I feel like we don't talk about that very much, and we consider it like not as important as, fulfilling this need to like make the world better, which I would argue you can do either of those ways.
I spent about 50% of my working life in the nonprofit sector and kind of moved back and forth. And I have nothing at all against corporate America. Like, they serve a function. The nonprofit sector also serves a function. But just as you were saying, like, people can get over that notion that the proper way to live a professional life is, in corporate America and then get a pension, which doesn't exist anymore.
No.
Similarly with entrepreneurship, I think it's not a one size fits all thing. We have friends and peers or Eve has mentors who have very successful businesses, and they have figured out, they grew it from their garage to a $50 million company. And I describe it as they figured out how to turn the crank, right? And sausage keeps coming out. And as long as you keep turning the crank and don't mess with it, sausage will keep coming out. Eve gets bored quickly. I don't mind changing directions every 18 months. My whole career has been a new job about every 18 months to 2 years anyway. So just as with a corporate career path, the entrepreneurial career path doesn't have to be, you don't have to 10x your revenue in the first 2 years. You don't have to, if you can and you find a way to do that, that's great. But if that's not your goal, and we've had some really interesting discussions with other entrepreneurs where they're like, oh, you just have a lifestyle business, which makes it sound like we're running an Etsy shop, and that's not, and there's even some Etsy shops that are doing, high 6 figures of business. So there's lots of different ways of fulfilling yourself and offering something to the world at the same time. And it doesn't have to follow a particular path. I have friends who are just now trying to start up their own businesses, and they're getting advice from like their professors at grad school in their MBA programs. And their professors are like, you need a business plan and you're never going to survive if your profit margin isn't X. And I'm like, but they're trying to solve the problem of a sustainable company that will eventually go public or exit to a large sale or something like that. And you're talking about making your mortgage payment for the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. Like you have to find what your level of success means to you and then find the way to achieve that.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit too, Levi, about Nerd Butler. So that's might be what you're best known for. So can you talk a little bit about what Nerd Butler is, where the idea came from and how people use it?
Sure. So as with most things in my life in the last 6 years, this starts off with Eve. We had just started dating, and one of the things I had told her when we met online and in our messages initially back and forth, I'm like, it's really interesting to me that you're an entrepreneur and would love to chat about that because I've always been fascinated by that. And I said one day, I had this idea about a services company that would help small business owners, deal with their technology because they can't afford an IT department, and going to the Geek Squad is a horrible, horrible idea. So not thinking anything of it, right? Eve started companies, and I was like, I didn't know her very well at that point. And the next day she starts texting me just different URLs. Like, do you like this one? Do you like this one? Do you like this one? I'm like, okay, nerdbutler.com. Great. I like that one. Like, that sounds really cool. And she's like, okay, go buy it right now. And like by the end of the week, she had printed me up business cards. She had one of her interns make me a logo, and she had 3 prospect meetings set up. So Nerd Butler started off as a professional services company that did exactly that, to act as the in-house IT department for smaller companies that could otherwise not afford it. Since then, the Social Media Delivered grew to the point where Eve brought me in as the chief information officer. And so I set it aside for a while. But I've done some consulting work from time to time, but Nerd Butler primarily is the label under which I dispense advice. What phone should I buy? What computer system should I get? And if you're a small business owner, like, what's the difference between Quicken and Xero? Like, why do I care? And I tell people, in very straightforward terms, like, well, this one does this better, that one does that better. They both cost the same. And so that's pretty much what it's been. Nerd Butler, its largest audience is probably on Twitter. And that exists because when I started working with Eve at the social media agency, I found a way to grow Twitter following very quickly. So Eve had a 90-something thousand followers at the time, and she had her whole staff constantly working to get her to 100,000. And I went from 0 to like 15,000 in about a month. And I was like, I'm going to catch you before the end of the year, and that's going to be really embarrassing for you. And so she basically threatened her staff, and when that didn't work, she came back and said, okay, now you're in charge of audience growth.
It really pissed me off. Terrible.
Hey, everyone needs a motivator. I'm pretty convinced I wouldn't be where I was without my husband basically telling me I needed to take this like unpaid internship while I was doing a postdoc. Probably now, that was probably like 6-7 years ago. I'm pretty convinced I wouldn't be where I was.
Yeah.
Everybody needs somebody, well, obviously, to support them too, emotionally and mentally. But you can't do things on an island. It doesn't work. Everybody needs somebody, and more than one person.
You basically need a team. I think the more comfortable I've gotten delegating, and I'm very comfortable delegating because I'm probably secretly lazy. is that I know how to surround myself with people who are more intelligent than I am in particular areas. And I know how to trust them and not micromanage them. And so Levi is the yin to my yang in so many things. And I've worked with so many great people that I can just trust to do all the things that I can't. I feel like so many entrepreneurs get caught up doing things they don't like and they're not good at. So they try to become a coder so they can build a website instead of just buying a service or sending it to a friend. They try to be really great at sales, even though they hate sales and they're not good at it. So they try to spend their time learning. I have tried to focus in like 3 areas because I'm really only good at like 3 things. Now, I'm maybe one of the best at those couple of things, but I don't try to do anything else at it. Because I suck at other things. And why shouldn't I pay other people to do the things that they love and are good at? So I think one of the biggest secrets about being a good entrepreneur is as soon as you have any little bit of money, instead of investing your time in what you don't like and what you're not good at, outsource it. Outsource it to people you trust. Look at friends and family first. Look at businesses you have used already. Look at people you trust. Look at your local area. Look at your network. And it doesn't just have to be people from business. It might be people from your church or your bar or your neighborhood. It doesn't matter. You know good people when you know them. And if you can trust them, you can spend your money with them.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's such a hard lesson to learn because we feel like we need to be so careful with our money, especially when you don't have it, but time's money too. And if you invest so much of your time, same way, I'm kind of the opposite where I will try to do everything myself and I know it's wrong. And I have a business with my husband and he's the one who has that attitude with, we're not good at this. Why are we wasting our time on this? Let's find somebody we know, who is good at it.
Absolutely.
And support other businesses that are local too.
Yeah.
It makes a huge difference and takes stress off you so you can focus on what you're good at.
Yeah, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs, like that is their job title, right? So they become serial entrepreneurs, whether the business failed or they exited and decided to move on or they just shut it down and started something new. But what Eve has done an exceptional job at, I think, is building that network around her. So her, our bookkeeper has been with Eve for 20 years.
No, 13, 14.
But she's known her for longer than that.
Oh, yeah. I've known her since high school.
But she
was a jerk in high school. But thankfully, she really changed in college.
We love you, Lisa.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Eve has built this really good network. And some of that was through traditional networking events. Eve is exceptional with LinkedIn. But a lot of it is just in the way you treat people and being open to sharing your expertise and not thinking that you have, entrepreneurship is not always about knowing more or even working harder. It's about your vision and your willingness to incorporate other people into it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think one of the best piece of advice I ever got is when you include more people, then, you get more value and more people are invested in what you're doing and want to make sure it succeeds. So I thought that was a great way of thinking about it for me. So I wanted to ask both of you too, what's your tie to Rochester? How did you get here and how are you finding Rochester? Because we're talking from you're at Silver Lake, which is, beautiful area, probably not so much now in the dead of winter, but give it 5-6 more months.
Yeah. So I grew up in Louisiana. My parents live in Louisiana. Levi and I live in Dallas, Texas, in Carrollton. And about maybe 12 years ago, my mom had struggled with her health, since I was 8 years old and now I'm 46. So forever. Right. And had gone to the National Institute of Health, had worked in Louisiana to try to get better and eventually made the decision to go to Mayo. It was a fantastic decision. Really, the treatment and the things that she got there saved her life. So she ended up staying for treatment for years. She actually lived in Town Place Suites Hotel for a few years. She lived in a friend's home for a few years. My dad would work in Louisiana and come back and forth. We're from Louisiana. We don't see much snow. Like we just don't understand. Number one, we don't understand snow. We don't understand basements. We don't understand food that is not highly seasoned. Like all of these things are very strange. And so the interesting thing is my mom and dad came here and they fell in love with Rochester. I think when an organization like Mayo saves your life or saves your wife's life, you're going to fall in love. But more than that, they fell in love with the people. My parents will talk to anybody, and they just really liked the people here. So they made lifelong friends, doctors and nurses and waiters and waitresses. And these became friends that grew up and visited them in Louisiana. And after years, my mom went home and kept on coming back here, for different things. And I just kept on fussing at them because I'm like, why don't you just buy a second home in Rochester? But my parents are risk averse and, careful in their planning. They're not, they don't love risk like Levi and I do. And so when March came, my mom really felt safer if she'd be close to Mayo because, she's doing great now. She's in remission, but she thought, talking to her doctors, if she were to get COVID, it would be great to be close to Mayo. And she was really quarantined. So she came here and stayed at a lovely Airbnb that I found. And then Levi and I decided to buy a house on Silver Lake because Rochester is their favorite place on earth. I've been coming back and forth for 10 years now, and I love it. And then we also thought that Silver Lake was a perfect summer home, right? Like we were here most of the summer. We've been mostly socially distancing too with our daughter and our dog. And we wanted a place to come. And so now we live in, I like to say we're very important entrepreneurs and very successful because we now live in my mom's basement, which I think sounds a lot like Will Ferrell and Wedding Crashers, which I like a lot. So this house is lovely. This neighborhood's lovely. And it's our summer home now. My mom's here. We had Christmas here. And then once we did that, Levi and I don't have any hobbies, right? Like we have no hobbies. Our only hobby is business, starting companies, helping entrepreneurs. And so that's when I reached out to Kim Norton and Rochester Women's Magazine and Collider and really wanted to get to know people in the startup community, wanted to form some relationships because when the pandemic is over, we'd like to have a lot of lunches and coffees and talk about the only hobby we have, which is business. And so that's how it started.
Yeah. Things will get better here soon. I feel like, it's, I know a couple, well, not a couple, since most of my friends are in healthcare, a lot of them have been vaccinated already.
Yes. People have been so welcoming. Like we do have a lot of friends from Mayo. We do have met a lot of people in the business community. We have a great network in Dallas and that's who we hang out with, fellow entrepreneurs and business people and clients and people who are in nonprofits. And we're hoping to have our second home here and the same kind of network that we can depend on and we can help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, when things start up again, I think you'll see a very different side to the city.
I'm excited.
Absolutely.
I'm so ready for all of that to happen again in a safe way. So we wanted to really talk about Diversity Crew and what that is. So can you both talk about, what is Diversity Crew? What kind of services do you offer through the business and who really is your kind of target customer?
Got it. So I'll mostly talk about this because Diversity Crew is my company. I own it and you can check it out at diversitycrew.com. But as I talked about my past when I was in marketing and sales for a long time, I'm known for that. I've traveled the world and spoken on that and made a lot of money with a great business doing that. But what I discovered is a passion for company culture. I was able to grow a company with less money than other companies. I was able to win culture awards and women-owned business awards and diversity awards. And I was able to develop a company culture with people that really felt that they belonged and were bonded. And when I looked around, I think at the time, I realized I had accidentally grown a very diverse staff without thinking about it, right? We simply hired the best people for a job and they were incredible. And we're still very close to almost all of them. And so I got really curious. So I started speaking a lot about women empowerment, allyship, writing about that, and working into that. And so I've been doing that for a few years. I also started working with companies around the concept of Ikigai, which is Ikigai, and it comes from Japan and it's finding your life's purpose. So it's kind of the thing that you were talking about where sometimes you, let's say our accountant that we've been working with for all these years, she is brilliant. She has a math mind, an art mind, which you find very few people like that. She loves to design jewelry, but she makes money from doing accounting. So her Ikigai, her life's purpose, how she's fulfilled, how she makes money, what the world needs, all comes from different places, but she's found the perfect mix. And that's okay, right? Like that's a fulfilled life. That's a happy person. Sometimes people beat themselves up that the thing that they do for a living isn't the thing that they absolutely love. Who says that it has to be? If you find that, that's wonderful, but you get to make your own rules for your life, and you get to grab happiness and support yourself and your family in any way you choose. One of the things I found is when I was doing marketing, I enjoyed it, but I wasn't fulfilled by it. It wasn't like my life's purpose. It was my way to support my family. And so I had my life's purpose through writing, through other things that I did. But now I would say my ikigai, my thing that makes money, that the world needs, that I feel fulfilled by, all comes together in DEI work, diversity, equity, and inclusion. So when I wanted to form Diversity Crew, I was very familiar with a lot of DEI organizations. And it seemed to me that most of them focused in one area. They would focus in racial equity or gender equity or LGBTQ+, and they would have a deep specialty in that area. I think that every human in every organization may be advanced in one area of equity, but may be just starting out in another area of equity. I, as a person, feel like I'm really advanced when it comes to women empowerment because I happen to be a woman, and I've been researching and discussing and speaking that for a while. But I don't know what it feels like to be a Black male veteran. I don't know what it feels like to be from another geographic area or to be Hindu. I don't know what it feels like. And so I'm not as advanced in those areas. So I wanted to form in Diversity Crew a group of people who brought their own experiences and vision to the table. People who were specialists in racial equity, people who were specialists in transgender, also people who were specialists in religious equity and mental health, which I think is going to be our biggest area of explosion next year for the need around corporations and nonprofits. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this is selfish. I wanted to learn myself. I wanted to have a network of people that could help me learn. And then I wanted, when we worked with organizations, to be able to move forward. I think right now what we see is, of course, a high need for racial equity because of the racial reckoning we've had in our country this year. But when you start with wanting to treat one group of humans better at your organization, you quickly learn that there are people who have many needs. We've gone into organizations and worked on racial equity, soon to discover that they've been losing women at a very high rate because the appropriate benefits and culture was not there. And so my hope is to learn where an organization is and to help them with what they need from that point. So we're partnered with a company called Canaries, which is KANARYS.com, also based out of Dallas, which is a minority and Black women-owned company. Can you explain a little bit about what Canaries does?
Sure. So Canaries is really, and I don't have their pamphlet in front of me, so they may have a slightly different way of saying this, but Canaries is a data-driven company that provides assessment tools for businesses. So employee surveys about where, how the employees feel it's going, what is management's attitude about X, Y, and Z. They work with companies to create. They have a boilerplate set of questions, obviously, but they work with companies to create surveys and questions that speak to specific needs within that organization. And then their goal is to stay with you sort of longitudinally. How are we doing today? Where are we at? And then we'll come back in 6 months, in 9 months, in 12 months, in 18 months, in 36 months, and do these assessments again to see if we are meeting the goals that we said we were going to meet. So Canaries has the platform and the tools for providing that assessment and then benchmarking and providing some analytics on an ongoing basis around how the organization is shifting over time.
Yeah, so they're really focused on DEI and intersectionality. So they can tell you, oh, in your organization, Black women do not feel included. And that's where they're leaving at a higher rate. And so there's always a lot of discussion in DEI about, are the things we're doing really making a difference? And so working with a company like Canaries, we can measure it and see. So what Diversity Crew does is training, management consulting, executive coaching, all kind of things that have to do with moving an organization forward in DEI. One of the biggest requests we've gotten this year, of course, is unconscious bias training, which we absolutely do. However, a company is not going to solve their culture and DEI issues with an hour and a half unconscious bias training. Like you don't, it's not going to get done that way. So we spend a lot of our time unselling training to people and asking to look at documentation, to have listening sessions, because this year, I think in a time where people are so emotional because of the things happening in our country, because of the pandemic, because of being cut off from friends and family to keep each other safe in a lot of ways. It's a lonely time. It's a time that is more affected by, mental struggles. I think, at least for me, it is as an extrovert. Levi, not quite as much as an introvert, but we're all responding differently, and we all, are worried about something. And so I think that this year, a lot of organizations have engaged us for listening sessions, because maybe it's not the time for an organization to say they have everything figured out, because I don't think anybody has everything figured out right now. Maybe we should take the time to listen to our people. So all over the world, we've had these private anonymous listening sessions where you've heard executives break down in tears or be very angry or be grateful for what they have, and all these different responses where we can really learn and understand, how do people want to belong? How do they want to be seen? How do they want to move forward? We have so much we can learn from our own teams and our own people. That was a long answer, but that was the basic scoop of all that.
There's the other thing I'll just add on to the end of that is Eve has brought together a really amazing collection of individuals with varied skills, and much as she did with the agency, she's bonded them into a culture and a team immediately. It's been remarkable to see. The other thing that's happening, and that every company is having to deal with now, is in addition to racial reckoning, in addition to gender equity issues and a variety of other social issues that we're dealing with, we're all having to do it from Zoom. And so I don't think there's a company out there with more than a couple of employees that hasn't had to deal with, how do I now incorporate remote work? We've had some clients with diversity crew who have said that's a non-starter. Our people are coming into the office, period, because that's their belief at the management level. And there's other companies that are saying, we can't have happy hours anymore. How do we reintegrate our management styles and our cultural initiatives within the company over in a virtual environment? So a lot of times, as you said, when you think of diversity, equity, inclusion, people immediately jump to race, to gender, to ethnicity. But it encompasses so much more than that, including geography and working style and pay equity and all of these different things. Being in the tech sector, I'm following with a lot of interest, like what's happening in the San Francisco area, because all of these very highly paid tech workers are moving to Idaho because they can do their job remotely now. And the companies that they work for are saying, that's great, but we're going to reduce your salary because the cost of living in Idaho isn't the same as it is in San Francisco. And they're like, no, I signed a contract, right? That is a DEI issue because the companies have to deal with this cultural shift and a reckoning of what does it mean to have a contract with an employee? What is our pay scale really based on? And it leads to some much more complex and broader arguments about what the right thing to do is.
I want to answer that question you asked, which is, who is our ideal client? I'll tell you who our ideal client is not. There are two types of organizations right now. There are organizations who want to do diversity, equity, and inclusion work because they want to treat their people better so they can continue to do their nonprofit or grow their company. We want to work with them. There is another group of company who feel like there is a demand from their people and the public to look like they're doing something. I don't want to work with them. And I got enough money to not have to work with them. It's getting very easy to figure out who those two companies are. And just like any entrepreneur, you can choose to spend your work on making money any way you want. I want to do it by helping organizations treat people better. And I firmly believe that leads to a healthier company and a healthier bottom line and a more profitable organization. So I think that we're seeing small organizations for the first time be open to DEI work. And some are feeling like an urgency from their own people requesting it. And some are just scared, right? Like They're frightened about how much money will this cost, or will this open me up to risk? There's a lot of scary things to consider around accessibility of your website, or how do you treat people with disabilities, or how are you recruiting veterans, or how are you making sure that you make a group of people feel included? These are all scary things to take on, but now there's an urgency to do so. So we have worked with a company as small as 50 people, a law firm that is a boutique law firm that was 50 people. We've worked with the American Society of Hematology that has thousands of members worldwide, and everything in between. But you'll hear companies now coming out and making a statement and even saying, for example, Mayo is a client because, saved my mom's life. I highly respect them, would love to work with, and they have announced this year, they've put $100 million over the next 10 years towards DEI. They've done some statements with the door opening up and being very clear about their intention. And it's exciting when, the top medical organization is doing that. We want to work with organizations like that, but it doesn't matter to us if they are large or if they are small. They're truly trying to move something forward, to get one step closer to being the kind of organization they want to be. That's the company we want to work with. So one thing I think that we do that is very different is we're hyper transparent about our pricing. We actually put our pricing on our website, which I don't think anyone's done. And so there's a couple of reasons for doing that. Number one, we want companies who are small and are scared and have never done this before to feel empowered. So we do custom proposals for training, because I remember our first training proposal was 75,000 people. So, you kind of can't charge the same for that as you can for 50 people. But besides that, all of our management consulting work, all of our executive coaching, our strategy work, all of our leadership sessions, all of that is $350 an hour. And the other thing that one of our partners made sure that we did is that we offer 15% off across the board to nonprofits and women-owned and minority-owned businesses, no matter what services they're engaging us with. And so by doing that and starting with a minimum of 10 hours, we have talked to companies of all sizes. In fact, our latest client actually, I think, has 9 employees. And it is a woman-owned company, a brilliant company in Dallas. And, it's interesting to go from working with a staffing company to a commercial properties company to a medical nonprofit to, some of the problems, some of the opportunities, some of the excitement and successes are all the same. And some of them are so unique or different depending on what country it's in or who's affected or where they're trying to move forward, or inherently didn't really realize how forward thinking they were and how much they had accomplished yet. So I don't think this work is just about the past and just about making people feel badly. I think it's about understanding where they are today and helping them do better tomorrow. Right.
Like you said, and I think it's so important, this isn't like a 90-minute workshop is not going to change your organization and, your processes and procedures and, your daily operations, really digging deep and looking. And that makes a lot of people really uncomfortable because facing what we've done, quote unquote wrong or could do better, which is more of the way to look at it, it's a really challenging thing for a lot of people.
It is. And these are such sensitive things to talk about because I'm definitely going to say something wrong at some point. I own this company and I work with these 30 people who are brilliant. But for example, we had training on pronouns all together as a team. And Shelley Roth is brilliant and taught us about pronouns. And I still hear myself, I'll talk to someone and I'll say, you guys, and then I'm like, why did I say guys? Why didn't I say y'all? And I'm still learning to get better at that and moving forward. We all have our areas to learn. We're all going to screw up at some point. We all have to I'm learning every day and I don't have it all figured out and I never will. So I'm interested in being in this world of learning. But some of the issues for us this year that we've heard the most about, and I think we feel the most urgent around, are health equity. Understanding during the pandemic and seeing so many people of color, so many, people of certain ethnicities and in certain geographic areas being hit with more suffering during the pandemic, health-wise, and then also economically. And so exploring more of that and focusing more on health equity next year is a focus for us. Another thing that we did is we brought a doctor of philosophy and religious equity on, because we don't think a lot of organizations look at religious equity up front. They look at it when there is a problem after. We have a lawyer on our team because we're not lawyers, and we know that some of these areas are sensitive. And then I'd say another area that I am most excited about is we've brought on 2 partners who are focused in mental health. Definitely this year, and dealing with intersectionality, there are people who are suffering far worse during the pandemic mentally than others. We're all, to some extent, possibly dealing with illness or death of ourselves, our family, or friends, economic struggles, fears that we've never dealt with, racism, gender issues. And I think that next year, besides health equity, mental health will be an area that we very much focus on helping organizations on the front end. What's it going to be like when we do go back to the office? What's it going to be like? I know right now I'm around people in person so rarely that even when I'm socially distanced with a mask on and I see them, I act a little awkward, and people have been my thing my whole life. So what will it be like when we go back to the office to feel comfortable, to not feel trauma, to not feel anxiety? How can we embrace those conversations and make our workplaces healthier places? So I'm excited to be able to move forward in that next year, and particularly in health equity and mental health and racial equity.
Absolutely. So I wanted to start asking you about your partners first. So how did you find a lot of your partners for Diversity Crew? Were they people you knew and worked with prior, and are they mainly kind of around the Dallas area, or kind of all over the U.S. because of, virtual world now?
Sure. So it's a completely virtual company. A lot of us are in Dallas, but we have people in Cincinnati, and we have people in New York and Ithaca, New York City and Ithaca, and all over the place now. How did I find them? Let me tell you my secret to how I found these brilliant people. This came from a dream that myself and Diana Slatton and Kimberly Banks, 2 of my dear friends who I've had one for 12 years, one for 20 years, we always wanted to start a company together, right, around DEI. So we went together and we got our diversity and equity and inclusion certification together through Yale. And we were really excited, wanted to start this company. And it was just going to be the 3 of us, 3 women taking over the world, right? Like, we're ready to go. And so then we started telling these people who are like really out of our league, in particular areas of DEI, like, hey, we're doing this thing. Would you support us? Would you tell somebody about us? Would you write a blog about us? And shockingly, we're really cool. And those people were like, I'll do better than that. We want to partner with you. We want to be part of this company. And honestly, we were really surprised because we didn't think we were as cool as them. But I think what happened is it was the perfect timing, because people felt helpless, right? They felt disconnected. They felt helpless. A lot of our people are full-time focused on Diversity Crew. Some of our people are doing this on the side of a management consulting career or their own DEI company they've been doing for 20 years. But they wanted a consortium that they could learn from and be part of, because people who were teaching on, for example, transgender would be approached and say, hey, can you help us with anti-racism? And that person was like, not really. And now they have this team where they work together on these projects, and they can bring in a team they trust. So some were people that I knew before, but most were some of the top people in their areas that I approached for support and decided instead to partner up with us.
Mm-hmm. And Diversity Crew started this summer, right? This July.
Correct.
Yeah. So what's it been like to kind of get that off the ground? What does that kind of feel to you personally?
So this is the first company I've been around for the beginning of with Eve, but I have listened to enough of her stories. This was also the first time we're a little older now. We're a little more settled now. We have a few more resources now. We didn't do this in the midst of, we're
not broke this time.
Wasn't desperation this time, right? So we were able to, we're still bootstrapping it. This is not the kind of company where we're seeking investment or anything like that. This is us and the people we're working with. But we did have some resources to invest in technology systems at the outset, to invest in more graphic design work, in a lot of those things we talked about earlier. We're like, I'm not good at that. I know enough about Photoshop that I could make a logo. It wouldn't be the best logo, and we would replace it as soon as we could. but we had enough resources to get that logo done correctly the first time, to have the website designed the way we wanted the first time. So it's been, I don't want to say relaxing, but Eve has commented repeatedly that, when we started this, she's like, you have to work 12 hours a day for the first 6 months to even have a shot. And we have not done that. Like even between the two of us combined, we haven't done that. We've worked relatively normal work weeks. We've taken the weekends off. And that has to do with Eve's ability to delegate. We have one full-time employee who's our business manager, Nick, and he handles a lot of the day-to-day, coordination and calendaring and things like that. But we also have a team. The partners are experts in their fields. Our accounting crew, the CPA and the bookkeeper, are experts in their fields. So Eve has really distilled it down to her doing just the pieces that she is exceptional at. And it's gone pretty well, I think.
Yeah, I've done this so many times now that I'm a pro. And it's the first time I've done it with any money, which is very exciting, right? Like, it's one thing to get your logo developed by your friend who you traded a massage with this friend, because she's a professional massage therapist, and they traded a logo and you wrote a resume for somebody. So this is the first time in my life I've had the money to actually hire all the people I want to do the thing. So it's been great. The other thing too, I want to speak very honestly about the mental journey that an entrepreneur takes. I was very depressed this year because I went from going to offices, getting on planes, speaking in front of audiences where I get my validation as a human, right? To being in my house to try and keep my family safe and keep others safe. And I was very depressed. And I felt like I was watching a world that I didn't know how to help. And so starting this company and being surrounded by these partners who I learned from was a way to help and a way to feel connected to people. We have a weekly meeting. We're working on prospects. We worked with clients very quickly. And we did things that I think truly changed things. And so it was my way to honestly temper my depression. I think with entrepreneurs, you have to always, a lot of people feel like you have to always act like you got lots of money or you got funding or you got everything figured out. We don't. I've been broke and I've been rich. I definitely prefer rich, but I've been broke and you can still do it. And it's a tough life because you have to be comfortable feeling sometimes like you're an idiot and doing everything wrong. And sometimes like you're a goddess, right? Like you know so much. And it is that roller coaster. And I don't think that people talk about it enough. And I think that a lot more people right now are starting their first companies out of necessity because they've lost a job, because things have changed, because their industry has gone away. And I want you to know that going into this, I've been an entrepreneur now for 14 years. I don't have it figured out. I know a lot more than I did 14 years ago, but I'm still winging it and treating clients and my partners as best as I can. The more transparent you can be in all situations, the easier it is, because there's just no lie to remember. There's no thing to fake. It's a really easy thing to do, to just tell the truth and pay people well and trust them, because somebody will let you down. But I think the number of people that will let you down is minuscule compared to the number of people that will lift you up if you trust them and you lift them up.
Yeah, I think for people listening who are kind of interested in doing more DEI work or incorporating, more in-depth processes into their organizations, what would you say to them to have them thinking more critically about it, or thinking about, working with others outside their organization to improve their processes?
Yeah, I think that you have to find a company or a person that works for you. And so if you have just one particular area you want to work in and that's where you want to focus, that's what you can achieve this year, then going with an organization that just focuses in that area makes a lot of sense. It really does. If you're looking for an overall strategy and plan that you may engage over the next couple of years, and bit by bit, you want to change the culture as a whole, expect it to take 3, 5, 10 years to truly change people and culture in your organization. It's not something that happens overnight. Training is valuable. I'm not saying training's not valuable, but it should be experiential. It should be training that is speaking to your organization and to what your people have expressed they need. This year and in 2021, I would urge people to focus on three things that I kind of talked about. Racial equity is something that I think is very urgently, people want to talk about it. They want to deal with it. They're ready to take some risks and listen and learn. And then talking about mental health for all of us next year, I think is really important. So look for those kind of services. And then the third thing is listen to your people. Ask them what they need, not just through a survey and not just you asking them. If their boss just asked them or somebody in the company just asked them, they're not going to just tell you the truth. Maybe you're the problem. Maybe they're the problem. Maybe something else is the problem. They're just uncomfortable. Get an organization like Diversity Crew or some organization you trust to bring an outside facilitator to have group discussions or measurement or surveys to understand, like, what do they really need to perform their best? What do they really need? The division between personal life and professional life is finally gone. We see your kid in the background. We see your husband walking around in his shorts and his slippers. We see your dog. We see your cat throwing up on the carpet. Like, it's gone. You can't pretend like you're not a human anymore. It's not possible. So as we re-engage in person and as we get through the next few months together, treating them as a human and making their life better and more manageable will make them a better employee and team member.
And one thing, if you're a business owner and you're kind of like, I have bigger fish to fry than this, or my organization's too small to care, or I just need to make payroll next week, like, there are certainly going to be bigger rocks to break for some people. But one of the things we try and talk to folks about is these are business issues. These are not, like, treating humans better is good, and we want to do that, but that's not a business goal. Now, do you have problems recruiting? Do you have problems retaining? Does recruiting cost more than retaining? For most people, it does. It costs more to replace that person than it would to have given them a 15% raise sometimes. Do I have more sick days? Am I losing more productivity because people are getting sick more? Why are they getting sick more? Well, obviously there's a pandemic, but we've all been living under stress. Stress causes poor mental health. Poor mental health causes other illnesses. You're losing productivity. You're having trouble retaining or acquiring the talent you need and want. Is there something in your business practice that is maybe not visible to you that there's an outside set of eyes could help you identify? So it's not just kumbaya and everybody feeling better. It's about treating people better, but that leads to better business outcomes.
Yeah, I don't know when this is coming out, but in case it comes out before then, we're doing a free event on January 21st of 2021. And it's ROI of DEI, Return on Investment of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. You can check it out at roiofdei.com. Yes, I had to check with my CIO. But the reason is this free event is our partners, but it's also some of the foremost chief diversity officers that we're interviewing to ask them, like, if you could tell people one thing they could do at their organization in 2021 that could increase their ROI through DEI, what would it be? Right? We're just going to ask them that one question and get them to answer it and share that with everybody for free. So we'd love for you to tell people about that and for people to come and attend that. It could be as simple as adding pronouns to your email addresses, right? It could be as simple as asking people how they feel and what they actually need. But we're excited to learn from people with all different types of backgrounds, nonprofits, large companies, small companies, and what they're doing. Because these are some really smart people that I can't wait to hear from.
Yeah. Well, this should be out right around that time, right before. Perfect. So that'll be good timing. Perfect timing. That's my last question for you all. I'll wrap up by asking for final thoughts and where can people find out more about, where can people find both of you online and find Diversity Crew?
You go first.
You can find me at Nerd Butler on almost any social media platform. You can find me at nerdbutler.com. I promise nothing about content except that if you do have a tech question, I love answering questions. I don't blog often enough, but if you send me an email, I will respond and give you, at least point you in the right direction for an answer to your technology question.
He loves helping business owners and people for free. because he doesn't care about money.
This is why I'm not a good entrepreneur.
Yeah, this is true. All right. So for Diversity Crew, you can go to diversitycrew.com. And if you want to talk to me, I'm on Twitter at Eve Mayer Media. That's Mayer. And you can also check me out at evemayer.com.
She loves LinkedIn as well. So you can find her all over LinkedIn.
Absolutely.
So, well, thank you all so much for the wonderful conversation today. I appreciate your time and sharing your story with us.
Well, thank you. We're going to hang out when the pandemic's over in Rochester. So if anybody is listening to this and you're cool, look us up and let's have coffee in a few months.
Thanks so much to Eve and Levi for sharing their story today, talking more about Diversity Crew and a lot of other topics. It was a wonderful and fun conversation for me, and I hope each of you were able to take something away from this conversation and that you can apply it to your business or your life moving forward. And again, you can find more information about Diversity Crew by heading to their website. Hopefully you all get an opportunity to check out their upcoming seminar on January 21st, this Thursday. And again, you can find links to that in our show notes. Thanks so much to everyone for tuning in to the podcast today. That's a wrap for podcast episode 209. Thanks so much for taking some of your time today to listen in. One big way you can help us, make sure you're subscribed to our podcast wherever you prefer to listen in to your podcast content. And it's also an amazing help to us if you rate our podcast to let others find it and to hear stories of Rochester entrepreneurs and learn about what's going on in our community. So thanks for tuning in. We will see you here next week with a brand new episode.